Welcome back to Hardware Unboxed. Today I'm looking at a monitor from a brand I've never used before, but one that a lot of you guys have been requesting, Viotek. They're super popular on Amazon and make some of the cheapest gaming monitors you can get, so I've always been interested to see how they stack up and whether it's worth buying this sort of monitor over a more name brand option. The monitor I have to review today is the Viotek GN32LD. Finally, a relatively simple name for a monitor. This FreeSync display is 31.5 inches in size and packs a curved 1440p VA LCD that tops out at a 144Hz refresh rate. It's priced at $470 through Amazon, which is around the mark of some other budget brands like Pixio and MSI that have monitors based on the same panel, but it's a lot cheaper than, say, the Asus ROG Strix XG32VQ or the Samsung C32HG70, for example. When testing out more budget-oriented monitors, I'm always wary of a couple of things. Is the build quality any good, and is the display defective in any way? To address that second point first, my retail monitor shipped with no issues whatsoever, so no dead pixels or anything like that, and in fact Viotek actually offers a full replacement if your monitor arrives with the dead pixels, so it's really not something to be concerned about. As for build quality, the GN32LD is fine. It's not particularly amazing, and I certainly wouldn't class it as a high-end construction, but it's fine for a gaming monitor. The base of the three-pronged stand is metal, but otherwise the stand's pillar and the rest of the monitor use a greyish plastic with a few red highlights. The plastic used on the pillar feels particularly cheap as it uses a really basic finish, though it's a bit better on the rear of the display itself. Overall, Viotek is using a gamer design here, which I tend not to prefer. There's a lot of strange angles and vents that it probably could have done without. There's also two RGB LED strips on the rear, which add nothing to the design. I mean, you're not even able to see them during standard operation, and their RGB support is basic. Plus, the RGB actually clashes with the red highlights, so overall it's a bit of a strange choice. The stand is sturdy and does support both height and tilt adjustment, although its height adjust is quite limited. There's no swivel support, not that swiveling is that important, and there's also no cable management hole, which again, not that important and a bit of a nitpick. My biggest issue with the design is the OSD controls. Viotek has gone with 4 buttons along the bottom edge of the panel, which makes navigating through the OSD a pain compared to a directional toggle. All monitors really should be using a directional toggle with menus of this complexity, no exceptions. However, the OSD itself includes a lot of features you'd also find on monitors from other brands, so you're not missing out on much going with the cheaper Viotek option. The OSD includes things like a low blue light mode, crosshairs for cheating, a super resolution feature, and even picture-in-picture along with the usual image controls. The array of inputs on the GN32LD is basic: DVI, HDMI, and DisplayPort, plus an audio output jack. The monitor supports FreeSync with low frame rate compensation, so you get adaptive sync across the entire refresh range up to 144Hz, and I still think the combination of resolution and refresh rate the GN32LD provides, it's a 2560 by 1440 monitor after all, is perfect for gamers with reasonably high-end hardware. It gives that great mix of smoothness and clarity. The Samsung VA panel used here is curved with an 1800R curvature. I'm more a flat panel kind of guy with 16:9 monitors, but at 32 inches in size, the curve isn't that bad. Plus, right now, there aren't many options for monitors of this size and specs that aren't curved, so you're pretty much stuck with it anyway. Let's talk a bit more about the panel and see how our test data matches up to Viotek's claims. For brightness, they list 280 nits of typical brightness, and I measured a peak of 365 nits, which is going to be too bright for most desktop users. The contrast ratio does fall a little short of Viotek's claims though, at a touch under 2500 to 1 compared to its rated 3000 to 1 value, although as this is a VA panel, we're still getting that nice high contrast ratio. It's also good to see this contrast ratio held throughout the brightness range. New to our test suite is response time testing, one of the most heavily requested metrics. We've bought some of the fastest tools available to test response time and gone about testing some of these monitors we've had on hand. And over time, as we do more monitor reviews, we will get a larger set of data for some suite comparisons. But the good news is we can now provide this key metric that tells us a lot about how the monitor fares in smearing, ghosting, and how suitable it is for gaming. So Viotek, they claim a 3 millisecond greater gray response time using overdrive, but in my testing using the high response time setting, and that's the highest setting available and the optimal setting for this monitor, I recorded just an 8.2 millisecond gray to gray average response, which is quite slow, but within a normal range for VA panels. As we know, VA is one of the slower LCD technologies, and that's on show in this result. It might also be useful to know that on average, rise times were significantly longer than fall times, almost double across our test points, and mid-gray transitions, for example, 20% white to 80% white, are particularly sluggish. I also recorded a 15.1 millisecond black to white to black transition time, which shows you the time required to make the largest luminance transition, in case you were wondering. The important thing to note here is that both the average gray to gray response and rise times in general actually took longer than the refresh window. This is a 144Hz monitor, so the frame is updated every 6.94 milliseconds, except this panel only is able to transition in on average 8.2 milliseconds. This means that in some cases you might not be getting a true 144Hz refresh because the crystals themselves simply can't transition fast enough to show a completely new image at that rate. While you don't get any noticeable overshoot, smearing and ghosting are concerns due to the long response time. However, this isn't an issue specifically with this Viotek monitor. Rather, all monitors that use the same Samsung VA panel will have roughly the same response times, equal to what I've shown here. So don't think that you're getting a faster display if you buy the MSI or ASUS monitors instead. They still use the same panel, so they're faced with the same inherent limitations of the VA technology. As for Viotek's 3 millisecond response time claim, not exactly accurate to say the least. The good news is the GN32LD exhibits excellent input lag of just a few milliseconds, so while transitions aren't especially fast, the monitor processes its inputs quickly and gets on with the job. And yes, we also have the ability to test input lag now as well, which we've normalized for the tools we're using to give an estimate of the display's processing time. And unlike some lag testing tools out there, our custom solution works at the display's native resolution and refresh rate. Before I get into color testing, let's look at uniformity. After all, this is a curved display where uniformity is often an issue. While results here aren't amazing and most flat panels will produce a noticeably more even image, the GN32LD is on par with other curved displays in this metric. The edges of the display are inaccurate relative to the center, giving a slight vignette style appearance, but I'm yet to use a curved monitor where this isn't an issue. Testing the monitor straight out of the box, it's quite clear that Viotek has spent very little time calibrating the display to any sort of color standard. Delta E values across our standard color accuracy tests exceed 4.0 from the factory, and the color temperature is a surprisingly warm 5894K on average, below what is required. On top of that, the 2.2 gamma mode the panel is set to by default does not produce 2.2 gamma, but 2.0 gamma, and colors in general are left unchecked, so the monitor is more saturated than it should be while displaying sRGB imagery. The good news is the monitor is quite calibratable, if that's a word, and you can make several key corrections just through the on-screen display. Using these settings here, I was able to correct the gamma issue. Bizarrely, the gamma 2.4 setting gives a correct 2.2 value, and tighten up the color temperature, which improves the grayscale delta E average to below 2.0, one of the better results I've seen just by adjusting OSD settings. Saturation and color checker results improve as well. Like with most monitors, you're not going to get the best results unless you perform a full calibration. The good news is a fully calibrated GN32LD is very accurate with delta E's below 1.0, indicating the monitor is well suited to color accurate work. Achieving this level of calibration only resulted in a small hit to brightness and contrast ratio, and this VA panel has a lot of headroom in those departments. Of course, I don't think many professionals would want to use a curved display for content creation, and the uniformity issues prevent the panel from being superb in terms of color accuracy, but if you want your GN32LD to be accurate, it is only a short calibration run away. And for those of you who are supporters of Hardware Unboxed through our Patreon page, you can download the calibrated display profile I created for the Viotek GN32LD over on our page. Links to that in the description below. While not every monitor is created equally at the factory, if you use my OSD settings in conjunction with my profile, you should be able to get near to the results I've shown here without any specialized tools. So going into this review, I was mostly interested to see whether the Viotek GN32LD could deliver the same sort of experience and performance as more popular monitor brands for less money. And I think in general, the answer is a resounding yes. That probably shouldn't come as a surprise, considering the GN32LD uses the same panel as other monitors with the same specifications, but it's good to know that this doesn't appear to be a low quality binning of the panel or anything like that. It's defect free and it performs exactly as I expected for this panel type. So if you were thinking about buying an equivalent monitor from ASUS but want to save a decent amount of cash, the GN32LD is a great option. That said, there are some areas where Viotek has cut costs to keep the price down. The build quality is fine, but it's basic and in some areas pretty cheap. The panel can be calibrated to a good level of accuracy, but no real effort has been made to tighten up color performance at the factory. And for a product that you'd hope to last many years, a 1-year warranty is shorter than some other OEMs provide. However, all that considered, I'd still recommend the Viotek GN32LD at its $470 asking price. Depending on the retailer, that's around the cheapest you'll pay for a monitor with these specs, give or take a few dollars. And when you're getting a viewing experience as good as a more expensive brand, I don't see a lot of point opting for a pricier equivalent. I'd also suggest you look at the Viotek GN32Q as well, which uses the same panel and is even cheaper, although it does use a rather unique gold design, which might be off-putting for some buyers. But I expect that monitor to perform pretty much exactly the same as the GN32LD, and I think it might be getting phased out for the newer model. That's it for this first review of a Viotek monitor. Hopefully the guys at Viotek will send out a few more monitors in the future because I know how much you guys love cheap monitors. Consider supporting us on Patreon to get access to display calibration profiles and our exclusive Discord chat, and I'll catch you in the next one.